So I can see that we have present Councillors Bradley, Brogan, Archie Buchanan, Matthew Buchanan. I have apologies from Councillor Kalikis, and do we have Councillor Salamati substituting? No. Okay, I have apologies from Councillor Convery, and we have Councillor Keats substituting. I can also see that we have present Councillors Cooper, Councillors Cowan, Councillor Devlin, Councillor Dewar. Do we have Councillor Fagan? No. I can see that we have Councillor Faulkner, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Fulton, Councillor Gowland. Do we have Councillor Gray? Sorry, yeah, I can see that we do have Councillor Gray. We have Councillor Hamilton. Do we have Councillor Lambie? No Councillor Lambie. We have Councillor Lennon. Do we have Councillor Lockhart? I can see that we do have Councillor Lockhart in the meeting. We have Councillor Marsh. I have apologies from Councillor McCallan, and we have Councillor Toner substituting. We have Councillor McCreary, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Ray, and Councillor Shearer also present, and there are a number of officers present at today's meeting. I'll hand back to yourself, Chair.
Well done. I was just testing to see how long it would take you there. Item 3 is a monitoring item. That's revenue budget monitoring 22-23 housing and technical resources, and it's page 15 to 20.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide information on actual expenditure against the revenue budget for housing and technical resources, excluding the housing revenue account, and the period we're covering is 1st of April 2022 to 12th of August 2022. That's our accounting period 5. This is the second report we've brought to committee for financial year 22-23. The report contains appendices A through to C, which provides fuller details of the financial position. On page 15 of the report, at section 5.1, we note that as at the 12th of August 2022, there is a break-even position against the phased budget. If I could refer members back to section 2 of the report, committee is asked to note the break-even position as at 12th of August 2022. Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. I'll move that recommendation. Is there any questions? No. Item 3 on the agenda, revenue budget monitoring 2020. Sorry, beg your pardon. Item budget monitoring 22-23 housing and technical resources. Back to you, Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. Again, the purpose of the report is to provide information on actual expenditure against the revenue budget for housing and technical resources, housing revenue account, period covered 1st of April 2022 to 12th of August 2022. Again, this is the second revenue monitoring report we're bringing for financial year 22-23, and just one appendix, Appendix A, on this report this time. On page 21, we have section 5 of the report. We note there that there is, for the housing revenue account, a break-even position against the phased budget as at 12th of August. Again, if I could refer members back to section 2 of that report, committee is asked to note the break-even position as at 12th of August 2022. Thank you.
Agree to note. I move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any questions? Thanks, Hazel. Item number 5, capital budget monitoring 22-23 housing and technical resources, and it's a non-HRA. I'm handing you over to Lorraine for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So this is us onto the capital reports now. So this is the capital monitoring report for the non-HRA of the side of the resource, and again it's the second report for 2022-23. It reflects the budget and spend position to the 12th of August, which is again our accounting period 5. So section 3 of the report provides a background to the programme and advises that the programme budget reported at the last committee was 8.125 million. Since this meeting, we have presented adjustments to the Executive Committee and for Housing and Technical Resources. These totalled an increase of £361,000, and those are detailed in Appendix A to your report, which is on page 27. These adjustments have meant that the budget for the year has increased to £8.486 million. Section 5 details the capital programme update then for the current year. Section 5.1 notes that the Resources Capital Programme for the year is the £8.486 million. The anticipated spend to the 12th of August was £544,000, and we had actual spend of £466,000. So we were showing a position of £78,000 behind profile. That mainly reflects the anticipated timing of spend on the multi-year and multi-project programme of prioritised urgent investment works. If I'm looking then to refer committee back to the recommendation in section 2 and ask that the Housing and Technical Resources budget of £8.486 million and spend to the 12th of August of £466,000 be noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Item 6 on the agenda, capital budget monitoring, housing and technical resources. That's page 29 to 32. I'm going to go back to Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. This is the capital monitoring report for the housing revenue account side. The period covered again 1st of April 2022 to 12th of August 2022, and again the second report we're bringing to committee for this financial year. Appendix A of the report provides further details, including funding sources for the programme. On page 29 of the report, section 5, we note that the Housing Capital Programme totals £66.361 million. The actual spend to the 12th of August 2022 is £16.150 million. The resource expects to spend the level of the programme detailed, and we will continue to monitor that during the year. If I could refer members back to section 2 of the report, committees asked to note that the HRA capital programme of £66.361 million and the expenditure to 12th of August of £16.150 million. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions? No, thank you. Item 7 is...
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard workforce monitoring report which is prepared by personnel, and the purpose of the report is to provide committee with an update on the employment information for the resource for the period June and July of 2022. Section 4 details the absence statistics for the resource, and you will see that in July the absence figure was 6.9%, and that represented an increase of 0.5 when we were comparing to the previous month. When we look at July 2021, the figure has increased by 2.2%. You will also see that the July 22 figure is 2.3% higher than the council-wide figure. We look at the average and the projected annual average for the resource, and looking at the figures to date, the projection is that the resource will be sitting at a 7% annual average at the end of the year in comparison to a council-wide average of 6.1%. Would note that managers do continue to follow our procedures as outlined within our maximising attendance policy to make sure that we're supporting employees appropriately to allow them to return to work or provide the appropriate support whilst they are absent from work. The absence information contained within the report, as we've done for quite some time now, includes absences as a result of COVID, and at the time of the report being produced, the Council's absence levels were sitting at 4.8% with 0.5% related to COVID absences. Moving on to section 4.2 of the report, which outlines the occupational health information, which details can be found in Appendix 2. You will note that 115 occupational health referrals were made during this period, which is an increase of 18 when we're looking at the same period last year. You will also see that the main increase is reflected in the number of medical examinations that have been processed during this period, and that would reflect the increase in our absence percentage as well. Section 4.3 details that there were 8 accidents or incidents recorded within the resource for this period, and that figure remains unchanged. Members will note that we do continue to monitor any accidents and incidents, and we continue to do so, linking closely with our health and safety colleagues. Section 4.4 notes that there was no employee relations activity for the resource during this period. And Section 4.5 shows that there were 11 leavers within the resource that were eligible for an exit interview, with 4 exit interviews being conducted. And again, members will be familiar that the participation in the exit interview process is voluntary, but we do try and encourage that to happen. Moving on to section 4.7 of the report, that details that there were 21 employees left the resource, and managers have indicated that all posts are being replaced. Section 5 notes the staffing watch information for the resource and the position as at June of this year, and we do a comparison to the staffing watch figures of March and note that there was an increase of 3 employees within the resource. And I would refer committee back to section 2 within the report and ask to approve and recommend to note the employment information for the resource for the period June and July of 2022. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. I'll move that report.
I'll second that.
Any questions? Very much. Item 8, Housing and Technical Resources Plan Q4 Progress Report. Cameron Mitchell.
Thanks very much, Chair. This report provides an update on progress at the end of Q4 for the Housing and Technical Resources Plan 21-22. Section 3, in terms of background, 3.1 notes that Housing and Technical Resources Resource Plan 21-22 was approved at the Executive Committee on 6 April 21 and set out the measures and outcomes that would be managed and delivered by the resource over that financial year. Section 5 is the section which actually details the progress that was made up to the end of Q4. Section 5.1 highlights the progress that was made against all the measures that was there. Section 5.2 provides a summary of these using the corporate traffic light system and shows that of the 67 measures, 6 are complete marked as blue, 45 are progressed in accordance with plan marked green, slight slippage on 8 marked amber, while 3 have been recorded with significant slippage marked red. 5.3 provides an outcome of all the achievements in the year, and I'd maybe pick out 2 or 3. Firstly, perhaps highlight in relation to prevention of homelessness, 93% of new tenancy sustained in the year against a target of 88%. 99% of reactive repairs were completed first time, and just 98.3% of rent was collected against rent due in the year, against a target of 96.3%. The table at 5.4 highlights the 3 measures which have been classified as red with significant slippage, and beside these we note the reason why they're recorded as red and the action been taken. In summary, these relate to the percentage of council stock meeting the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. At the end of 21-22, 72.25% of council stock met that standard against a target of 94. The decrease in this indicator relates significantly to delays in installation of heat and smoke alarms, which itself was mainly due to the lack of stock and ability to access homes. The programme to actually address that issue is actually in place and has been progressing since August. The second measure, which is marked as red, is a percentage of rent lost due to properties being void. At the year end, the outturn was 1.53% against a target of 1.35%. The performance in this area is an area that we feel continues to be impacted on by COVID and in terms of workforce issues and supply issues. There is a continuing and significant focus on this area within the resource with a designated void team in place and close monitoring performance. The third red measure, which is identified, is to increase settled accommodation by converting 40 temporary accommodation units to Scottish secure tenancies. By March 2022, during that year, 21 homes were actually converted. This actual target is derived from the Rapid Housing Transition Plan, where we are making good progress there, where I think to date 80 against a target of 100 properties converted, which is the objective to achieve that by 2024. It was perhaps an ambitious target, but it was one that certainly in the broader sense we're still making good progress against. Section 5.5 highlights Appendix 3 of the report outlines the measures where there's been changed status to Q4 and provides an explanation for these. Referring the committee back to the recommendations at section 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations. Firstly, that the Housing and Technical Resource Plan Q4 Progress Report 21-22 is summarised at 5.2 and attached Appendix 2 of the report be noted. Secondly, that the key achievements made with the resource to date are, as detailed in paragraph 5.3 are noted. Thirdly, that the areas for improvement and associated management actions as detailed at 5.4 are noted. And finally, that the additional scrutiny of the changes will have a change in status, summarised at paragraph 5.5 and detailed at appendix 3 is also noted. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Cameron. I'll move that report.
I'll second that.
And I've got a couple of people who want to speak. Councillor Cowan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Chair. I welcome a lot of the stuff in the report. It's a lot of good stuff, especially the homeless work, which is continuing, and you know it's fantastic. I've got a couple of questions. The heat and smoke alarms. I know that you know you're still trying to make progress on that. I think the last time I asked, I was told we had updated about 70% of our stock. That's probably still about the same. I know stock's an issue, but I just wondered what efforts, how are we reaching out to tenants to gain access to their homes? Obviously, there is a slight health and safety issue, but I know that they already have smoke detection, and so you know it's not that they're sitting without any protection. But I just wondered, you know, what we're doing to try and gain access to these properties, which have been a problem before.
Cameron. Oh. Hey, Joanne.
Thank you. We are experiencing quite a high level of no accesses, as you've mentioned, for properties that are remaining on the programme. So we're doing a series of things just now, increasing publicity. We've had articles in the news, and we are making appointments. Unfortunately, we're getting even 66% no access, even where we have an appointment. So we're now escalating up, trying to make further appointments, but we're also looking to see what other measures we can take regarding access. We haven't gone to the stage of forced access at the moment, but we just keep trying to make repeated appointments and turning up. But we have a focus group and we're talking to legal services and others about what options we can then use.
Okay, thanks. And I also have another question. It was a two-part question, really. It was about the flipping of the temporary accommodation to secured tenancies. And I just wondered, that there's, I mean, obviously there's never enough of anything. There's never enough housing, temporary housing for homeless people. And so I just wonder if this is a policy that we should be actively pursuing at the moment. I mean, is it something that we actively pursue? Do we encourage people when they're in a temporary accommodation to flip and to stay? Because, you know, while that can work for the individual, and this brings me to the next part of my question, is there's obviously, you know, dreadful cost of living crisis at the moment. Interest rates anticipated to go up to around 6% by next spring. And for a lot of people, that's going to be a 300% increase in their mortgage payments. I'm sure the people sitting here this morning, if you just think about how much that's going to be to you personally, it's huge amounts of money. And so while obviously we've got, you know, our social tenants, I'm also concerned about people who have never dealt with housing before because they're private homeowners, and these people are possibly going to have to sell their homes next year, or worst case scenario, they're repossessed. And I can see a lot of people landing on the council's door looking for accommodation. And so I just wonder, so 2 points really, should we be encouraging people to flip their tenancy when we need every emergency property that we can get our hands on? And secondly, what, if any, plans are we making for these poor folk who are going to land on our doors in the next 6 to 12 months? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor. I think in terms of flipping, you almost answered your own question there.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of a balance that we look to achieve in every instance. You know, we have, I think, converted today 80 properties. We're really proud of the fact that we only use appropriate mainstream housing as temporary accommodation. We're not using types of temporary accommodation that we'd really try to avoid in all instances. So the decision you're making is the thing which is obviously a good to the person, which is they actually can convert a temporary home to a permanent home. But at the same time, looking at ability to actually replace that and the scarcity there, that type of location, size, type, in the area that we need for the levels of homeless application we're receiving. I think we continue to actively look at it. That's 80. I think it was probably, it wasn't something that was, it really was a standard part of practice, and I think certainly locally, and I think with Partners Across Scotland, that's picked up. So I think there's then a question, perhaps the target we set in that year, which we actually put a resource target against what was a strategic target to achieve with partners from the RRTP, is maybe something we need to think about, but we will continue to think about what's the appropriate level. I think that's that balance. I think in terms of your point, which is really probably the most high-profile issue right now in terms of the cost of living crisis, now it's going to play out in terms of the most basic need that somebody has for a home. It's something that we're all mindful of. We keep such a close eye on the homelessness trends and the nature of applications coming in. All the way through COVID, we tried to monitor, sometimes predict what would happen. Sometimes we were right, sometimes we were wrong. And I think in this instance that the likelihood of people who are in private housing in the owner-occupied sector and perhaps in private rented may actually be increased demand. We will keep an eye on that. You know, we have got housing option services there for anybody regardless of tenure. We try to promote access to that service, and there's maybe just the way in which the tools we have available that we maybe need to look at how we develop these, again with partners, locally in terms of community planning and also nationally as well. I think there's national schemes which we have used. Locally we work with our 20-odd RSL partners as well to try and see what we can achieve. But I do think that in terms of actually options, in terms of people actually being able to stay in their home who are owner-occupiers, there's maybe a national as well as a local question in terms of the scale of a scheme that was maybe developed for a different time. And locally, I think certainly about promoting that the services we provide are there for you if you're at risk of losing your home, regardless of the tenure of housing you live in. And we just need to, of course, resourcing that will be the challenge as well for us.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose my concern in regard to people who are owner-occupiers is that they will never have perhaps dealt with housing. You know, when people think of the housing at the council, they think of council housing, don't they? And so I'm just, I just want to be confident that we are going to, you know, reach out to these people as well, so that when they're starting to get into trouble, they know that they can contact the council, because it might not be the first thing they think of. That, you know, so that there's that as well. It's just, I think it's a big issue, and I think we should be planning for it now. Is basically what I'm hoping for. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Salamati. Beg your pardon, Councillor Mars. Let's keep changing.
Thank you, Chair. If I could direct people to page 57 of the pack and the paragraph regarding registered social landlords and how important those are to the strategy of ensuring the homeless presentations are dealt with effectively and quickly. I'm also very interested, knowing that housing associations are also an important part of that strategy, to understand what is being done to look at the lease criteria. I'm aware that whilst council tenancies have a basic standard and a shower is absolutely standard to our properties, the same is not necessarily the same for housing association or registered social landlords. And I'm certainly aware of situations where presumably on the basis of cost, the ask to install such has been refused, but obviously coming into a winter where fuel poverty will be significant, and people already potentially in dire straits and in a homeless situation may face additional challenges. I'm wondering what work is actually ongoing to look at the criteria for our leases, where we are effectively buying in services for homeless presentations, but also for the general list.
Much, Councillor Mars. At first point I'd probably make in terms of housing associations and registered social landlords is that they probably operate to the exact same standard as we require to operate, and the Scottish Housing Regulator regulates them to that standard, and they require to report against that. I think locally we work with our partners to try and make sure we access appropriate accommodation. If there was issues there, then of course we can pick them up. But I think that certainly in the social rented sector, the expectations of a tenant in terms of the standard of property, the regulator is monitoring and checking against exactly the same requirement. I'm not sure if I'm maybe missing your point a wee bit, but certainly for housing associations.
Certainly, it's not my experience, and certainly the specific examples that I've been involved with, then our criteria for buying in those leases didn't define necessarily washing facility types and heating in that detail. And I'm concerned that going forward, that the cost to families, may be significant. And I'd like to see, if we're buying services, that the same standards are across the board.
I think probably what you're referring to would be the properties we lease for the private sector to use as temporary accommodation for homeless households, which we have done, which would be mainstream housing. And with these, again, we would inspect these to try and make sure they were at the same standard. But if there's any particular issues, I'd be happy to speak to you separately and go through. But certainly, the housing associations regulated by Scottish Housing Regulator to the same standard. If it's properties that we lease, then we would always look to make sure those were acceptable to us, the standards we would expect. But if there's any specific issues, then happy to pick them up with you.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, what you're saying doesn't totally tally with my experience, and I'll maybe get in contact with you. Yeah.
Thanks, Juliet. Councillor Brogan.
Thank you, Chair. It's page 42, Share Key Achievements Report 531. It's really just a request for some additional information here. I think your report would be more effective if, as well as percentages and days, you could add pound values and numbers. 99.96%, for example. I don't know if that means 1 is left or 500 is left. So if you could do that, that would be useful, certainly for me. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Do that either as a note for committee or individually, whichever would be more appropriate, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the question on the fire alarm that was spoken about earlier, I take it that we would have the same powers that we do when we are doing the central heating checks on an annual basis. We have the power to force entry. Is that the case on the fire alarms, or would we have to seek separate legal rights of entry? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. It is a statutory requirement, so yes, there is a legislative basis for us taking entry, but we are discussing with legal what that process should be. But we're also trying to tag on to those gas servicing visits, the smoke alarm being done at the same time, so that we are, if you like, using our existing access rights to try and deal with both issues.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Chair. Thanks,
you. Councillor Shearer. Councillor Faulkner.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on the smoke alarms again. I understand that some of our installations are contracted out. Are we supplying a remote control with all these smoke alarms? And the reason I ask this is it's been highlighted by some home helps who have been asked by elderly people who haven't got a remote control to turn off their smoke alarm when it's went on. And we have a risk of people getting injured there. So is there a remote control given with all smoke alarms?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. A remote control is not automatically given, but if we are asked to provide one, that can be arranged. So if social work or healthcare or a local member advises us of the requirement, we can make arrangements.
Thanks, Alan. You want back in, Andrea?
Thanks, Chair. Can I... I'm looking at page 64, just in connection with the Gypsy Traveller sites. Apologies, it's not necessarily linked to what you've said here, but it is something that was raised with me and that concerned me a wee bit. There were reports from down south that the Gypsy Traveller sites were not accessing the £400 utility help from the government because the utilities came through as one supply through the owner of the site. So they were only getting one £400 discount as opposed to the individual residents. So this was highlighted down south about a month ago. And I understand that recently that has changed. The legislation has changed to allow the individual residents to get their £400 as individuals, which is great. So I have a couple of questions. Just really to confirm the South Lanarkshire owned sites, can you tell me how they're billed? Are they billed through South Lanarkshire? And if so, do we have provision for them to make sure the residents get the £400 each? And also, can you confirm, because there's a Showman site in Blantyre, and they have a commercial electric meter. So I just wanted to know if the sites, the South Lanarkshire owned Gypsy Traveller sites, have domestic rate electricity meters. Thanks.
Janet?
Thanks, Councillor, for your questions. We are aware there's been a change in the regime around payments for what has been termed as park residents, which would include Gypsy Travellers, for the cost of living payments around utilities. We are awaiting confirmation of what the amount will be and the process in which we can share that to the residents within the 2 council-owned Gypsy Traveller sites in Lark Hall and East Skilbride. As I say, we're not fully aware of the amount and the process for getting that to them. Just now, the utilities are paid to the council. The site at Blantyre would be a private site, and I don't know what the arrangements will be for that.
Yeah. It was, and so can you confirm that the Gypsy Traveller sites that we own are on domestic rate electricity supply, as opposed to a commercial rate? I know the Blantyre one's nothing to do with us. It was just an example that I know that they are charged at a commercial rate for their electricity, which is substantially higher.
I'm aware that the rate is actually lower than current domestic rates.
Oh right, okay, that's contrary to what I was advised. But the South Lanarkshire Gypsy Travellers sites,
It's the 2 council-owned Gypsy Traveller sites. I don't know the position at the private site, but the 2 council Gypsy Traveller sites, their rates are actually lower than the commercial, than the domestic current rate.
So they are commercial rates.
They are.
Yeah, because I think that will affect the support that they get. So that's fine. I'll just keep a eye on that. Thanks very much.
Anything else? That's all. Thanks very much for the questions. Item 9, it's items for decision. Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Plan 22 to 25, pages 71 to 80. And I'm going to hand you over to Elaine Maxwell for that.
Thank you, Chair. This is the last of the Council Resources Workforce Plans that's going to be presented to committees, so members may be familiar with the format and the style that has come before you today. So the purpose of this report is to present the Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Plan for 2022 to 2025 and highlight the key strategic actions from that. The workforce strategy for the Council was presented to the Executive Committee in 2016, and following this, each of the resources developed workforce plans covering the period of 2017 to 2022. Resources have now had the opportunity to review those plans in line with the workforce planning cycle and then now covering the period of 22 to 25. Section 4 of the report outlines the workforce planning toolkit that was followed, and there was 4 stages in that process. Resources had to look at their internal and external drivers in line with the resource plans and look at how this links to service delivery and the requirements for the workforce. The next stage was to look at the current workforce data, the profile and trends and projections of future requirements. There were 2 stages then to inform the objectives of the plan, what the plan will achieve, and the resource management teams, along with the business manager myself, worked together to identify the actions required to address the workforce challenges that we're facing and identify any actions to reduce the risk to the service impact. Section 5 of the report outlines the workforce plan overview, and you'll see that's attached to Appendix 1. For housing and technical resources, the key themes for workforce planning that were identified were the demographic profile of the workforce and impact on succession planning, the ability to recruit and retain employees, the development of the current workforce to ensure skills are available to deliver in our key strategic areas for future development and changes in respect of climate change, sustainability and our new IT technology, the refugee resettlement programme and widening asylum dispersal and maintaining employee wellbeing and resilience. We then looked at the actions to address these challenges, and these are detailed in section 5.3 of the report. And these cover areas such as improving our recruitment practices to ensure we're attracting and retaining employees, looking at our graduate apprenticeship and other apprenticeship approaches to our recruitment, further expanding our links with schools and colleges to encourage those to consider roles within the council, and expanding on our methods of training and development, growing our own talent to make sure that we're future-proofing our workforce, as well as having a robust succession planning across our several key areas and reviewing working practices, making improvements and using improved use of our workforce assets and consider future needs to deliver these services in this changing environment, as well as optimising the efficiency of our existing workforce. Underpinning all of this, we need to maintain our employee health and wellbeing to ensure that our workforce feel valued and supported. Members may be aware, as I said through previous reports, that this does align with their general common themes across all resources and resource action plans, which are detailed as in terms of that increased demand in what is a reduced workforce pool, which is an issue not only for South Lanarkshire Council but across a number of local authorities. The demographic challenges that we're facing in terms of our age profile, our increased turnover, employees that are choosing to retire earlier than we would normally be expecting, and the flexible working requests we're receiving, and then, as I say, look at succession planning. And again, just reaffirming that employee wellbeing. Section 6 of the report then highlights the risks, and that our actions need to identify what's going to assist the resource to achieve the right people with the right skills to deliver our services, as I say, and there are risks if these actions cannot be delivered. And the risks quite clearly are that we will have a reduced workforce supply with a risk to deliver on the actions identified. So we need to look at our adapting our services to be delivered within the workforce available. The ability to maintain service requirements given the time that we need to take to train and develop our employees to achieve the required skills mix that we need, given the complexity of what the service provides, as well as those competing recruitment drives across authorities and other service providers, which means that we've got a reduced staffing level in some areas. Looking on at section 7, we do explain that the action plans are going to be monitored, and that will be done through the resource management teams, as well as reported through the corporate management team. And with that, I would refer committee back to section 2 and ask that the recommendation that the content of the report be noted and that the Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Plan be approved. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Is there any questions or comments? Councillor Salamati. Oh, there's the screen going again. It's back.
Andrew, it's not working. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Carry on.
Sorry, initially I had some technical issues. Finally, I managed to sort out. My question here, may I refer people to page 72 of the report, section 5.2, where the report identifies the number of key issues, the challenges for workforce planning. The first bullet point refers to the demographic profile. Looking at page 76, I noticed the only information on equality trait is presented is the age profile of the workforce. My question is that what about other equality traits? Why other equality traits such as gender, disability, race, religion, etc. are not being monitored? And looking also at action plans, also I don't see anything is referring to improve equality and diversity of workforce. My understanding is that local authorities, including South Lanarkshire, we have a vision or a target to, to improve the equality measures in terms of employees, the demographic, workforce demographic, to be representative of all South Lanarkshire areas demographic. Regarding gender, disability, race, religion, and other equality, is not there, and why not? And why there is no equality and diversity monitoring included in the workforce plan in terms of for recruitment, and in terms of target setting, implementation, measures, all levels and grades. So I don't see these things, and I was wondering where we could find this information, and is there any target within the workforce to to improve equality measures and diversity? The reason I'm asking is that this kind of stuff has been discussed in the Equality Forum, and we really need to monitor and improve on that. Thank you.
Elaine?
Thank you. And as you said, obviously there's an equalities group that meets now. Our equalities information, you quite rightly, we do have to monitor that, and it is recorded and reported in different reports. In terms of our workforce, our council-wide workforce monitoring, there's quite a bit of scrutiny around all of our obligations under the equalities report. In terms of this particular aspect was about, the impact in terms of, the retirement age was the important part at this particular point, because it was looking at retirals. It was looking about, what we could project in terms of people that were potentially going to be leaving. And that was why there was a specific focus on the age on this particular report. That's not to say that the other, equalities aspects are not important and not monitored and considered, and they are reported in other areas. And certainly I can direct you to the information that you're required if you're looking for more information. But it wasn't deemed necessary to detail that in this particular report because of the purpose of it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's just the main thing is that, in section 12 of this, your report says there's no equality impact assessment on this one. So I was wondering where would I find the information. Thank you. I appreciate if you can provide that.
Thanks, Ali. Okay, no more questions? I'll move that report.
I'll second it.
Okay, thanks very much. Item 10 is the Scottish Housing Regulator Annual Assurance Statement 21 to 22, and that's in pages 81 to 88. And I'm going to ask Annette Finnan to deal with this one. Annette.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks committee approval to submit the annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator. The background is noted in section 3 of the report. Each year, local authorities are required to submit an annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator, confirming compliance with regulatory requirements and highlighting any breaches. South Lanarkshire's annual assurance statement for 2021 was approved previously by committee on the 29th of September 21. The annual assurance statement for 21-22 for the Council is attached to Appendix 1. The assurance required is provided through a wide range of arrangements which are in place at a council and a resource-wide level. A summary of the key requirements and how these are addressed is attached to Appendix 2. The regulator recognises that councils are continuing to work to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and appreciates the impact on compliance with regulatory requirements. In this year's statement, there are 2 areas noted where full compliance has not been met due to the ongoing effects from the pandemic, and these are noted at 4.5. They are the completion of fire tolerable standard and fixed electrical testing as part of the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, and the completion of improvement work within one Gypsy Traveller site relating to fire safety guidance. Actions are being progressed to address both areas as a priority. In terms of next steps, subject to approval, the annual assurance statement will be signed by the chair of this committee and forwarded to the regulator. If I can take you to the recommendations on page 81, committee is asked to approve that the South Lanarkshire Council annual assurance statement for 21-22 be approved and submitted to the regulator. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Annette. Do we have any questions or comments? Doesn't appear so. I'll move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Item 11 on the report is the South Lanarkshire Strategic Housing Investment Plan 23 to 28, and that's in pages 89 to 120. Again, I'm going to ask Annette Finnan to take us through this report. Annette.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard report that we provide to committee, and it updates on progress delivering affordable housing through the Strategic Local Programme Agreement during 21-22 and seeks approval for the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, known as the SHIP, for the 5-year period from 23 to 28. The SHIP is a technical planning document required to be completed and submitted to the Scottish Government on an annual basis. The SHIP closely links to the local housing strategy approved previously by Executive Committee and guides investment funding to meet the strategic priorities for affordable housing. The SHIP has been prepared taking account of the impact of COVID-19, of the revised guidance issued by the Government, and takes account of the financial resources that have been announced. The plan is not a programme and will be subject to change as new sites become available and some are assessed as not viable. As noted in Section 4, COVID-19 disrupted the Council and our other partners' development programmes. However, despite the challenges, good progress has been made in increasing the supply of affordable homes in South Lanarkshire. The report highlights at Section 5 and 6 the links to national strategy and the revised grant levels that are in place. Sections 7 and 8 of the report provide an update on the progress made during 21-22, noting the total number of affordable homes for social rent that were delivered across South Lanarkshire by the Council and our housing association partners, and note the progress in the Council's Home Plus programme. A summary of completions, acquisitions and current sites is detailed in Appendix 1 and 2. With apologies, can I highlight to committee a couple of errors with the figures? The figures at Section 8.4 should say 1,008 additional homes, with 38% designed for particular needs. And also the combined total of the Council and the RSL figure, as reported in Section 7 and Appendix 1, should be 551. As noted in Sections 9 and 10 of the report, the Scottish Government has provided resource planning assumptions to local authorities covering the period to March 26. The RPA for 26-27 and 27-28 have been forecast using the RPAs for the previous years, and assumptions have also been made in relation to years 1 to 5 of the plan, in line with Scottish Government guidance, bringing the total resource planning assumption for the 5-year plan to £190.37 million, as noted in Table A. The SHIP has therefore been developed for forward planning purposes to show the potential development capacity at this level of resource. The full SHIP, which is attached to Appendix 3, reflects the Council's priorities for council new build and acquisitions, as well as the ambition of our housing association partners who have confirmed their capacity to develop. The tables within the SHIP include projects that already have funding commitments, as well as a number of new potential sites consistent with the LHS priorities. Table 1 on page 114 sets out priorities for grant funding to be delivered over the 5-year period. In total, the sites identified have an estimated capacity of delivering 2,562 additional social rented affordable homes in the 5-year period across the 4 housing market areas. The capacity to increase the supply of affordable homes has been over-programmed to allow for any slippage and enable investment to be targeted. The assumptions and forecasts set out are based upon the best information available and will be subject to refinement as part of the annual review. Future reports will be presented to committee to seek approval for delivery of individual sites for new homes. The SHIP will be submitted to the Scottish Government at the end of October, subject to approval, and it will go on to form part of a national plan for the Minister to approve. The committee is asked to approve the recommendations on page 89, that the progress made in increasing the supply of affordable housing through the SHIP and the SLPA be noted, and that the content of the SHIP for 23 to 28, as set out in Appendix 3 to this report, be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Annette. The point you made there about the amendments, is that going to reflect in the minute then? Will that be changed?
I'll pass that information to our colleagues so that they can minute the amendment.
Okay, thanks. So, any questions or comments? I've got Councillor Cowan.
Thanks again, Chair. I wanted just to talk a wee bit about the Council's buyback policy and how successful or otherwise it is. Back earlier in item 6 in the capital budget monitoring, it showed that there's £2.37 million allocated for buybacks. But it looks, if I'm reading it right from earlier, that in 5 months, none of it's been spent. And that looks to me as though there's an issue that, you know, we should be making more of the council or ex-local authority buybacks. I asked and was sent the policy, so thanks very much for that, Annette. And I've had a look at it. So it's clear from the policy that if you want to sell your home back to the council, you're required to put it onto the open market. And personally, I've dealt with a couple of people recently or over the past 18 months who inherited an ex-council house from an elderly parent or grandparent. And they asked me to contact the council completely independently of anything I said. They said, can you call South Lanarkshire Council and ask them if they'd like to buy Granny's house? And twice I was told no, go and put it on the open market. I put them on the open market, and of course, actually a private landlord bought a 3-bedroom terraced house in Cathkin. And that was a completely missed opportunity. That property was being literally handed to the council on a plate. It needed a bit of work, but certainly cheaper than buying a 3-bedroom family home, than building a 3-bedroom family home. So what I would really ask is that the policy be reviewed. In light of what I said earlier, we are going to have, I think, lots more people coming to us over the next couple of years looking for homes, looking for accommodation. And I think that this needs to be addressed. If it goes onto the private market, the private landlords are going to buy them, or they're just going to stay in the private sector. So that's the first thing I would ask, is that can that be reviewed? The other thing is that I've worked in property for 40 years, and it's not easy to find out when there's funding available. And I've never been approached by the council in all those years. They've never come to my firm or any of the firms that I've worked for and said, we've got some funding, do you have anything suitable that we could buy or that we could be interested in? And so I think that you need to bring the professional bodies in. You have to bring the estate agents, the solicitors who are dealing with executories, and there's perhaps a property to be sold. I think they need to be made aware that this funding is there, and we need to make it easier for people to be able to sell their homes back to the council. I think that would definitely hedge a gap. I will say as well that I also had one recently, a property in Burnt Island, and when I approached Falkirk Council, they told me the same thing, go and put it on the open market, which is what we did, and somebody else bought it. So you know, that's 3 properties in the last 18 months that I've got personal knowledge of, where, as I say, twice with South Lanarkshire. And I'm not blaming the council, but I think, or any individual department, but I really would strongly urge that this policy is reviewed and looked at. Thanks.
I think I asked a similar question a while back, and I think, and I'll answer the question. Remember the answer being that it's regulatory. We're not allowed to actually do that. The law forbids us from doing it that way. But Annette can clarify that, Annette, if that's the case.
Thanks, Councillor, for your question, and good points made around the open market purchase scheme. We've had the scheme in place for a number of years now. In fact, I think we were one of the first councils to have such a scheme. It does provide a really cost-effective way to increase our stock. Year to date, we have bought 16 out of a target of 67. I think the finance paper, it's just a timing matter, but we are making progress in terms of purchases this year to date. The current policy does state that properties should be on the open market unless they are a long-term empty property. We varied the policy a couple of years ago and do require a home report. We recognise absolutely that the housing market has changed and we want to maximise opportunities. So we are already proposing that we bring a future paper to committee to look at varying the scheme so that we can maximise the opportunities that are there in the market. The detail of it we'll need to work on, whether it still requires a home report, etc. I'm conscious that a local authority not far from here has just varied their scheme as well. So I think all councils are looking at their schemes and looking at the opportunities where they can potentially vary and make sure it works right for the council. So it is something we are going to be doing. In terms of reaching out to agents and professional bodies, I absolutely agree. That's something we need to actively do, and we will take that on board. Thank you.
Can I just ask for clarification there then? Is it the council's policy or is it legislation that prevents us from doing it that way, innit? Where we can buy directly instead of going to the open market? Council's policy, that can be changed. Okay. Does that answer your question, Andrea? Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments? No. I'll move that report.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, it's 11 o'clock and going by the normal procedures, we'll be adjourning for what, 5 minutes? 5 minutes to give the interpreters a rest. Okay, I'll see you back here at 11:05. Thank you very much. Okay, that's 11:05, so let's resume for the rest of the meeting. Item 12 on the agenda is the Housing Services Customer Information Strategy Annual Review 21 to 22, and that's pages 121 to 142. But before I ask Cameron to take us through that report, I would just like to offer my thanks to the Tenant Participation and Coordination Group. They work really well with the council. They spend a lot of time, so I just wanted to make it public that we really appreciate their time and their efforts, and thank you very much for that. So back over to you, Cameron, for item 12.
This is the fourth customer involvement strategy we've had, and we're now well into the period of this strategy. It details the work that's underway also to develop a new strategy, which is very much in the horizon for us. Moving to the background, at section 3, 3.1 and 3.2 confirm that the previous strategy was approved by the current strategy was approved by the council in May 2018. The strategy it's actually, in terms of the review, it's the fourth review as well of that fourth strategy. 3.3 outlines the 4 strategic outcomes that the strategy is structured around, which are customers informed and knowledgeable, more customers involved, customers help to drive continuous service improvement, and finally, customers help to shape change and make a difference. Certainly, the focus is for all the regulated customer groups that we have, which include tenants, homelessness customers and gypsy traveller customers as well. So that's the scope of it with the statutory requirement. 3.5 picks out a point, and certainly the Tenant Participation Coordinating Group, which helped us undertake the review. We're keen that we brought some of these points out, that the impact of COVID has been such that some of the priorities and actions we proposed to progress over the period of the strategy, it's not been possible to take forward to date, and as such, their proposal was that we extend the strategy to the end of this financial year to allow some of these actions to be commenced or completed through 22-23, while at the same time we turn our attention to a major undertaking for us, which will be to replace the current strategy, taking account of an awful lot of learning the Lotus had in terms of customer involvement, community involvement and participation over the past few years. In terms of Section 4, summarises annual review. It confirms that the review covers the period 1st April 21 to 31st March 22. The document itself is attached to Appendix 1. The work of the TPCG, which actually keeps an eye on the strategy with the council throughout the year, is something that all the way through our experience since 2020 with the onset of COVID, that we actually managed to keep going with the tenants, and 4.2 highlights some of the significant progress that we've made in the year in 21-22. Particular focus of that was actually on the budget and rent setting, which each year they actually sit and actually look at how the budgets that be set to then inform any rent issues, and that's then fed into the Housing and Technical Resources Committee come the February, as it was this year. Also draw out just to your attention the significant progress which has been made with the 2 gypsy traveller sites in terms of working with the customers, which has been recognised in terms of excellence, both by COSLA and through the Municipal Journal. There's been some excellent work done there by the residents on the sites and by local staff to actually to take that on, along with partner organisations as well. So these are 2 things I would just like to highlight from 4.2. 4.3 to 4.5 just notes that the types of area that will not be able to progress largely due to the impact of COVID, which include further development of locality engagement and walkabouts, which is something we've been moving on with, as well as actually the further development of youth engagement, which is really, we've always in agreement with Education Resources that be a priority and worked really well with some universal connection services, etc. But I think during the period the review, it was not really possible to actually get that moved on in the understandably in terms of the focus for those services with us. Section 5 notes the priorities and consideration for 22-23, which kind of the foremost of these is the co-development of a next customer involvement strategy. We've had well-known community reps who have taken very well to engaging digitally with us, who rather than getting dragged to Hamilton, is to put in inverted commas in a cold night. So we've got learning for that, and I think also how we can maybe increase the reach, scope and breadth of what we're doing in terms of diversity as well, to ensure the representativeness of what we're about. We're also, the tenants, however, also were keen that during the year we actually looked at how we further develop communication engagement with new tenants to promote customer involvement, which maybe then plays into what the work we're thinking of taking forward for the new strategy as well. So that was a second point. And thirdly, just in terms of our young people, that's one that's outstanding that we're really keen to see if we can move on in the year, and we're making some progress with that. And also that we continue to publish a calendar of activities and events as a way of trying to promote opportunities and maybe try to be innovative in terms of that. At 5.2 we highlight we've actually returned to a hybrid form of meeting in terms of meeting with our TP coordinating group, Temp Participation Coordinating Group, which is an old title. It's maybe something the review will think about in a virtual as well as in a face-to-face basis. We've started that again. The just next steps, kind of just drawing that together at 7.3, the real focus will be to work in conjunction to produce a new strategy, maybe set a kind of slightly different agenda, and that's something we're looking to actually get the broadest involvement, including in views of elected members and communities to actually where we might go. And I think certainly some of our tenants reps are keen that we actually maybe see how we can really broaden what's there. The recommendations at section 2 I'd refer you back to, which is the committee is asked to approve firstly that the Housing Services Customer Involvement Strategy 18-22 annual review for 21-22, attached Appendix 1, it be noted, and that the proposed timeline for the development of the next Housing Services Customer Involvement Strategy be approved. Thanks very much, Chair.
Any questions or comments? Alan.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 132. I mean, in our years in South Lanarkshire Council, communication for consultation hasn't been very good. It was highlighted last year with the budget, which got a 3% response to it. And I've raised it at other meetings with communication. We have communication with every household in South Lanarkshire once a year through the council tax. And we should be putting information in there to say to people, would you like to be consulted in housing, social work, education, and what form of consultation would you like that to take place? Right, whether it's phone calls or whether it's online. I mean, it's an easy thing done. If the person decides they don't want to be consulted, fine. We've given them the opportunity, which the legislation says we should, and I think we should consider something like that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Faulkner. I think the review, there's probably some fundamental questions about how we actually expand what we're doing. I think there's probably a lot of experience. I could think of our own resource where annual rent setting letter, we used to include loads of attachments, including things linked to that. We never get much response. I don't think would be fair. I think looking at social media where we're making tentative steps, I think you see different groups of folk coming back to us, and I think there's things we can do there. The Tenant Involvement Service who run the Independent Advice Project, they've got their own Twitter feed. We try to feed in there, so it's know the council, just try to get you engaged, but other support organisations that are there for it. So I do think that's the type of debate we want to get, and what might work for one group of people in whatever circumstances, one geographical area. And I think that's the motto I think we'd like to have is if you want to be involved, we'll find a way that works for you. And I think there's enthusiasm among the tenants and certainly among the officers to actually see if we can actually move that on and achieve that, because I think I'm so close to naming the community rep, which I won't, but actually making the point, I can't believe you asked me all these years to come to Hamilton and Dreich nights. And it resonates, every elected member will know that. So I think there's, how can we use technology to actually make meetings there, and how do we get folk to actually participate in things they want to be involved in, and how can we show the difference they're making, linking into all the stuff going on in terms of community participation and empowerment corporately. But I think there's a specific agenda for housing, homelessness and gypsy travellers, and I think in some ways the work we've done in the gypsy traveller community maybe shows the way for other bits where the community themselves feel they're actually driving it. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Cameron, for that. I've got Councillor Ray Norman. Got a wee bit. Oh, you got it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to maybe feed in some concerns that I've heard in my ward, particularly relating to a particular group of customers, as it were, and that is those who are owner-occupiers within council blocks, multi-storey blocks, and therefore the council is the factor for them, as well as owning obviously the majority of the flats. The concerns that I've heard is that they're not being given the sort of active involvement that they feel is necessary. That decisions are made and they're told about them, and then they obviously have to pay whatever their contribution is, and they maybe don't feel that those decisions or the particular interventions or work that's being done is appropriate. They've got ideas on how it should be done that haven't been sort of consulted on prior to the decision being made. So I suppose just to feed that sort of concern in that they're maybe being sort of forgotten about because they're obviously a minority of the customers. The tenants are by far the greatest majority.
Somebody going to respond? Go on.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. The owner-occupiers wouldn't be part of the tenancy consultancy because they're part of our factoring service. And we are, again, beginning to look at how factoring will look. But a lot of the decisions around how that is managed are in the owner-occupiers' title deeds. So sometimes consultation won't change what we have to do in terms of the way the title deeds are written out, but certainly it's something we'll pick up when we're looking at factoring.
Thank you.
So, no more questions. I'll move that report.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Item 13, 1 Kilmorley Road, Carluke, asset transfer to Carluke Men's Shed, and that's pages 143 to 148. Joanne, could you take us through that? Sorry. Oops. Councillor Hamilton, was that in reference to the previous report or this one?
This one.
Okay.
I'm keen.
Quick off the mark there.
I don't know why.
Okay. Joanne, can you take us through this report, please?
Certainly.
And we'll bring you in, Lindsay, at the appropriate time.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise committee of a request for asset transfer by lease of 1 Kilmorley Road, Carluke, by Carluke's Men's Shed. Carluke Men's Shed submitted a request which was validated on the 13th of July, and the request is for a former cemetery house and 2 small outbuildings. During the public consultation, 10 representations were received, 9 of which were in support and 1 was neutral. The Community Asset Transfer Assessment Panel have considered the request and taken into account the matters that are all set out in section 3 of your report. The panel has recommended the request is granted on the basis that the property is suitable for the proposed use, the organisation has capacity and funding, and there are community benefits in relation to health, education, environment and recreation. The community benefit was assessed at 71% discount, which would suggest a rental of £1,100 per annum. However, the Men's Shed have offered the council £500 per annum. The panel took this into consideration, and as the Men's Shed are also prepared to undertake the property repairs to the property, which are estimated at around £25,000, the £500 per annum still provides best value to the council. It's therefore proposed that the committee agree to the 5-year lease to the Men's Shed on the terms and conditions set out in section 5 of the report, and I would refer committee back to section 2 and ask for their agreement to the lease. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. No, it's more a comment that I want to add support to this report. It's the Men's Shed's a really good organisation in the town, and they've been struggling a bit to find suitable premises. So it's really really positive that they've found this empty property that's been empty for some time. So I would just it's a really positive move for the community group in the town, which is obviously got lots of members, but is hopefully this will make them have some more. So I would just like to add my support to the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. On a similar vein to my ward colleague, Councillor Hamilton, this is a good use of not a derelict building, but an empty building by a fine organisation that will do great work, I am sure, and I think it's definitely to be welcomed. and it's a good move forward for council and for the main shed organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, David. So no more questions. I'll move that recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Item 14 on the agenda is Charter ERC, which is 21-22, pages 1490 to 154. Cameron?
This report we bring to committee each year provides an update on the Scottish Social Housing Charter and the requirement we have to produce each year an annual report on our performance and against that charter. The background to the report 3.1 and 3.2 notes the statutory requirements of the charter. It was set up for regulation. We need to do this. It's there. It provides a range of different purposes, but certainly this is a specific one when we actually get the comparative information against a limited number of indicators. 3.3 notes that we actually submit our 21-22 return on the 26th of May 2022. So linked to the report that Annette brought earlier on, the annual assurance statement, this is just one of the reports that maybe we bring to committee to make sure committee's got oversight of where we are comparatively. The comparison is set out at section 5 of the report, which basically notes that there are 12 indicators against which we actually compare ourselves with. And in that context, these are summarised and set out that Table 5.2 notes the direction of travel for 12 indicators. 4 of the 16 indicators included are purely contextual. The kind of direction of travel is summarised at 5.2, which is with 3 showing improvement, 3 remain the same, and I'll explain a wee bit about that in a second, and 6 have declined. But overall, our performance remains strong against all these, particularly compared against the Scottish local authority averages. The 2 quantitative indicators which we improved last year were the average days to complete non-emergency repairs, reducing from 13.7 days to 11.76 days, and rent collected, which is a figure we highlighted earlier on when we were talking about the Q4 report. In terms of the 3 figures that remain the same, the 3 qualitative indicators which remain the same, these are summarised at 5.7. These are figures that we have to update on a 3-yearly basis. That's the regulatory requirement, and we'll be doing that in the current year for reporting. Not in the charter that we've just returned, but in the one beyond that, if that's not too confusing. The 5.8, it kind of also notes the improvement in one satisfaction indicator, which is the tenant satisfaction with repairs, which is an ongoing annual survey at 9.1%, 90 of which we increased from 90.1 to 91% in the year. The next step is really we're asking for so in terms of next step, we'll just note that the resource plan includes the majority of charter indicators at 6.2, and we will continue to monitor and report that as part of the scheduled resource plan updates to the Housing and Technical Resources Committee. Referring you back to recommendations at section 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations. Firstly, that the Council's reported performance and contextual information for the Scottish Social Housing Charter and comparisons with other social landlords at Appendix 1 be noted, and that the use of the Charter for ongoing scrutiny by the Scottish Housing Regulator, tenants and other service users be noted. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much, Cameron. Any comments or questions? Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worthwhile noting that this has been over a very difficult period for the council and for everyone through COVID. And to actually come out the other end of that with such high marks, okay, there are a few things which we have to work on, that's acceptable. But really, I would like to thank the officers for all the work they've done over a very difficult period. And I think this report shows that they've kept to a very high standard. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. I'll move that recommendation to note this report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Item 15, Housing and Technical Resources Plan 22 to 23, pages 155 to 178. Again, I'm going to pass you over to Cameron. Cameron Mitchell.
Thanks very much, Chair. The purpose of this report is noted at 1.1 in the report is to present Housing and Technical Resources Resource Plan 22-23 for consideration and monitoring. In the background, we highlight at 3.1 that the report The draft resource plans for 22-23 were prepared prior to the local government elections in May 22 in line with the corporate resource planning guidance. It also highlights that following the election and subsequent approval of the new council plan in 15 June 22, the draft resource plans were reviewed and updated to take account of the new priorities and outcomes within Connect 22-27. So really these are actually established. In terms of the Housing and Technical Resources Resource Plan, Section 4 provides an outline of the plan, noting which is attached to Appendix 1 of the report. 4.2 notes the resort has established a number of objectives to support the delivery of the Connect priorities in 22-23. These are detailed in Appendix 2. While 4.3 notes arrangements for reporting progress with the resource plan to committee, which will be reported as we did today at Q4 and at Q2 during the year. And in terms of just moving to the recommendations, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the resource plan 22-23 attached Appendix 1 be noted, that the resource plan 22-23 be uploaded onto the Council's website following today's consideration, and thirdly, that the progress reports on the resource plan 22-23 be provided, as I mentioned, at Q2 and Q4 to the future meetings of this committee. Thanks very much, Chair.
Any comments or questions? And there's none. I'll move that report.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. I have no other items of urgent business, so just left to thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much.